Greetings, Race community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Jeff Webb, who serves as president and CEO of the US Naval Academy, Alumni Association, and Foundation. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Brent. Good morning.
Well, I have been looking forward to meeting you and hearing your story, and certainly appreciate the collaborations with many members of your team. And we're going to start today's conversation as I have with now over 160 advancement leaders, wanting to learn a little bit more about your own higher education journey. So take me back to junior year of high school. Who was that Jeff? What was he into? And what led you to the United States Naval Academy?
Well, first of all, I love the authenticity because we had no preparation, no setup, no, this is what I'm going to ask you. And we just are diving right into it. So I appreciate that. But going back to junior high, interestingly, I'm sitting in Annapolis, Maryland, where the Naval Academy is located, where our operation is located. And it was in this location in Annapolis, a half mile from here, where I got exposed to the Naval Academy as a middle school kid, because my dad was in the Air Force, stationed at the Pentagon. We had a little boat, came to Annapolis on the weekends, and I saw the midshipmen walking around with white uniforms. I saw Top Gun. It's the Top Gun era, and I just got really excited about the Navy and the Naval Academy, even though I came from an Air Force family.
I was fortunate to meet several of your alumni during business school. I went to Harvard Business School, and there's a great, intersection of Navy alumni and HBS, and it was amazing to me how often Top Gun came up as part of what inspired people to think about that path. And we just went through, in fact, a year ago in October, my then 9 and 7-year-old boys had a Top Gun Maverick themed birthday party. And so now are we in like the second wave of application interest, in part due to just amazing storytelling?
There's no getting away from it. I started here a year and a half ago, and right as I started, that's when the movie was being released, and they screened it here at the Naval Academy for all the midshipmen. And so I got to go sit with the midshipmen. It was just so surreal. Like, this is what brought me here. This was decades ago. Here we are again. And many of them hadn't even seen the first movie. So, but they love the second one. So it won't die.
Incredible. So you get that exposure, and do you immediately sort of set that aspiration? Because it's no small feat. There's a lot of, A, you got to aspire to do it. B, you got to, earn the opportunity. And then there's a process to go through.
Right.
I actually went through that process and ended up having an opportunity with the Air Force Academy. Unfortunately, not the Naval Academy, but maybe for our guests, or for our audience, I should say, just like walk folks through that experience. Like, what is the nomination process for those who don't know? And at what point did you decide to really go for it?
Yeah, I went back and forth through high school. We moved away from Annapolis for 9th through 12th grade. I was in California and then Washington State. And I wasn't quite sure I wanted to do something that hard, honestly, because I knew how challenging the service academies are. Just, you've got a brutal lifestyle. I shouldn't say brutal. You got a busy lifestyle. You've got your academic requirements, and then you've got all these military requirements. Everybody plays a sport. There's just a lot going on. You don't really control your own schedule. So I wasn't quite sure I wanted to do it, but I did my best to set myself up for it by actually just doing the things I wanted to do anyway. I mean, the Naval Academy and the service academies, they like folks who do well with their studies. They like leaders. We're developing leaders here at the Naval Academy. And if you show evidence of being able to do that as a team captain or leading some activity, that's great. Sports and athletics are important. There's a physical mission at the Naval Academy. So you want to know that your candidates are physically fit. And also there's just a strong correlation between, performance on the sports field and performance in other areas as well. So I did all the stuff I enjoyed doing. And thankfully, it made me at least somewhat competitive for the service academies, although it's just off the charts. It's so hard. If you saw the men and women here today, so many of us alumni would say, I don't know if I'd get in today. And, it might sound like fall humility, but it's true. Like they're unbelievable what they've done even before getting here. But to get into a service academy, you've got to pass a physical, you've got to pass a physical test, you've got a very robust application, and then you need a nomination from a senator, a member of Congress, the president, or the vice president. And that's its own process. That's like applying to college on its own, getting one of those nominations.
And so it's one thing to aspire for that, but it's also, given everything you just described, hard to bank on that. There's no sure thing that relates to that process. And so, how are you thinking about alternatives, and also at what point did you actually find out that this would be an opportunity?
Yeah. Well, you always got to have a backup plan. So I applied to the Naval Academy, to Air Force, and a number of civilian schools, and I was able to secure an ROTC scholarship. So one way or another, I was serving, and I found out about ROTC before the service academies. And remember, I wasn't even quite sure I wanted to go yet. Then I found I got into the Air Force Academy. I don't remember when, sometime in the winter of my senior year of high school. And then in February of my senior year, I found out about the Naval Academy. And it took me a little while. I wasn't quite sure. And I finally decided that I would regret it. I would regret avoiding the hard path, is what finally got me to do it. And I would say that was a continuing theme in my life, where there were certain things I was interested in. Like I ended up in the SEAL community, and I knew that was no easy road. But I just told myself, if I pass this up because I know it's going to be hard, or I know there's risk, I'm just not going to be able to live with myself. I'm not going to be satisfied. Like I have to do this. And so that's what drove me to the Naval Academy, and what drove me to pursue the SEAL career.
So when you think about your time as a midshipman, what was your, what are one or two of your just favorite memories, whether it's, or maybe I'll say most poignant memories, because it doesn't have to be fun necessarily, but just memorable.
Yeah. When you go through any kind of challenging circumstance, just the camaraderie is what gets you through it. And so, start as a plebe year, they take away all of your rights and give them back one by one as privileges. And so just those times when you're bonding with your classmates is really special. Like, for example, we're getting ready to come to the Army Navy game up in Boston. You're in Boston, right?
Historically, Everture's been in Boston. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're heading to Boston, and the 13th Company of the Naval Academy, the midshipmen, the 4,400 midshipmen are organized into 30 different companies. Well, the 13th Company runs the football to the Army Navy game. And I was in the 13th Company. So when I'm a freshman, a plebe, my classmates and I and our upper class or other company mates, we got to run the football as a relay to the Army Navy game in Philadelphia. And because we were the freshmen, we got the 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. relay in the middle of nowhere in Delaware was what we got to do, where the upper class that got to run the ball into the stadium. But that each company and different sports, they just have all these little different traditions and these different rites of passage, and that's one that I really enjoyed.
And so the commitment you're making is at least 5 years of service following graduation. And at what point within the student experience are you even thinking about that next aspiration, whether it's the SEALs or I have a good friend that's been a JAG officer for the last 20 years. Like there's different paths, and frankly, how much of that is up to you versus how much of that is sort of told to you?
Right. Well, some people come in knowing what they want to do or thinking they know what they want to do. In my case, I came in thinking I wanted to be an aviator. But the beauty of the Naval Academy is you just get all this exposure to the different warfare communities and to the Navy and the Marine Corps, because you can go into either service from the Naval Academy, and you get to experience them through summer training. And then you have officers on the yard or the grounds of the Naval Academy. You have senior enlisted at the Naval Academy from these different communities. And you just get to learn and get some exposure and see what job appeals to you. See where it feels right with the people. See what your aptitudes are. Some folks might come in and discover they're really good at the technical subjects and engineering, and might find themselves drawn to the submarine community. Because if you go into the submarine community, you start off with nuclear power school, which is highly technical and challenging. It's like getting a master's degree in nuclear engineering coming out of the Naval Academy. And that's not for everybody, but for some people, they're passionate about it and they're good at it. But your question about how does it work out, you get exposure to things, and then there comes a point where you say, this is what I want to do. So when you're a senior or a firstie, you rank the things that you want to do. You say, okay, my first choice is I want to be a Navy pilot. My second choice is I want to be a Marine Corps pilot. My third choice is I want to be a surface warfare officer. I want to be on ships. And there's this massive algorithm and process run by the Naval Academy where they try to match up what the midshipmen want to do and who the services want. So it's a little bit of a draft. It's a little bit of a ranked choice process. In the end, 85 or more percent of midshipmen get their first choice. I think 95% of midshipmen get their first or second choice. So it's a big, it's not quite a black box, because there's some human involvement here as far as how you rack and stack the candidates and through the different communities. But it's a very involved, thoughtful process that I think yields a great outcome, where you get people who know what they're getting into, who are suited to the field they've been selected for.
And so is joining the SEALs number one on your list?
It was.
And of your class, how many other people started that path too?
We probably started with 80 people who raised their hand and said, I'm interested. And they started going through the training and the screening. In the end, I think we had about 45, call it qualified candidates, and they selected 15 of us, 16 technically, but one of the 16 was already a SEAL. The first enlisted SEAL to graduate from the Naval Academy was one of my classmates.
Wow. So, amazing, tradition and history, and as civilians, we'll never understand all the nuances of, rankings and best or whatever the arguments might be out there. But, without a doubt, an amazing group to be a part of. Well documented how challenging it is physically, mentally, and so forth. Like, what can you tell me about just reflections on that experience, recognizing that while I've interviewed over 150 advancement leaders, you're not the first veteran that I've interviewed, but I'm going to guess you're the only Navy SEAL that's leading an advancement organization around the country, maybe around the world right now. So this is my chance to learn.
Well, I'd say the Naval Academy prepares you very well. So the attrition rate at SEAL training is about 80%. Roughly 80% of the people don't make it through because they quit or they get hurt or have some kind of other physical challenge. The Naval Academy ratio is extremely high. As far the completion ratio is well over 90% of folks who come from the Naval Academy. And I think that's a function of just the preparation and exposure you get before you get there. So just as I mentioned the camaraderie at the Naval Academy, it's no different in SEAL training. It's even amplified, where you get there, and as an officer especially, you might be a boat crew leader. As a boat crew leader, had 6 enlisted men in my boat crew at any given time, and they were my responsibility. So I was their leader and I was their teammate, and we were going through it together. So if you're worrying about the people around you and not yourself, it's a lot easier to grind your way through that thing. And you just get lots of good advice. And a couple things that stick out to me are just one day, one evolution at a time. And the instructors give you advice. I mean, they're there to weed out the weak and weed out the people who shouldn't be there, yet they tell you everything you need to know. And one day, one evolution at a time is one thing that stuck with me. And the other one is really simple, where in a pretty dramatic fashion, this instructor Walker, sat us all down in a classroom on day one, and he went up to this big whiteboard and he drew a line across the whiteboard. He said, "Gentlemen, this is your life." And then he takes a marker and he puts a couple little hash marks on the left end of it. And he said, "This is 6 months. Everything you got, anytime I ask for it for the next 6 months, that's what I need out of you." And when I listened to that, what I thought is, okay, this is a moment of time. This is going to end. So I best just listen to him. When they say go, we better go.
So I saw, and remind me at a given time, roughly how many SEALs are there? Is that a known?
Yeah, they're roughly, just call it 2,500 active duty SEALs. Might be a little higher than that, but it's in that ballpark.
So I saw, for example, that you've had some intersection with Jocko Willink, who has probably done, more to kind of elevate leadership and that experience than just about anybody. It looks like you maybe had some engagement there, as it relates to your own leadership training. And it looks like you guys might have overlapped just in your timing of when you were in the SEALs. And so would love just, your reflection on that. And then any recommendations for people as it relates to just general leadership lessons.
Yeah, Jocko and I overlapped in service. He did a full career. I did 5.5 years. I believe when I was serving, he was on the West Coast. And so we never served at the same team or deployed together or knew each other when I was serving. But I've met him. We got a lot of friends in common. It's a pretty small community. So very quickly you establish, I was in a platoon with this guy and I know that guy. I worked for this person and this was my chief. And, you quickly figure out how well connected you are, because you're connected to everybody one way or another. But Jocko also has a partner named Leif Babin, who's a 97 grad of the Naval Academy. Jocko did not go to the Naval Academy. And they've built a terrific leadership business. They've written great books and Jocko's got a great podcast. So it's really impressive what they've done.
Love it. So let's talk about your transition, as back to civilian life and really into the world of business, and how much of that was, because what a huge transition, right? Four plus years with the academy, 5.5 years in the SEAL, and then it's like show up to a normal job. I mean, that's right. Just not a normal transition. And I'd love to just know more about, how you approached that, if you reconnected with the academy at that time, or if you kind of did it on your own.
Yeah. So I left
or maybe it's there was the MBA experience
right.
as well that probably played a big part.
Yeah, that was my transition. I knew I wanted to experience life out of the military because I grew up in a military household. I was serving in the military, and in the SEAL community, at a certain point, you don't really get to operate that much as an officer. You move on to more management type responsibilities. Not completely. There are some operational opportunities now. Certainly, there are many more than when I was serving. But I just decided that I wanted to experience life as a civilian. Had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't grow up. I didn't know any lawyers. I didn't know any bankers. I just was a little bit in a military bubble as a kid. And I chose to go to business school and was fortunate to get into University of Virginia And I literally came off a deployment and wrapped up my responsibilities and then drove to Charlottesville and started business school. So it could not have been in a more abrupt transition. In fact, I missed orientation just because of the timing. So I came in like day one in class, and I've been spent the last 5.5 years with a bunch of pipe hitters, knuckle draggers, and now I'm in this class with 40% international students and half women, and just learning entirely different things than I'd been focused on in the military. But it was a wonderful 2 years. I really liked the environment in Virginia. But I didn't come out of there after 2 years and a tremendous investment in my education. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do still. And I didn't nail it on the first try or even the second try of my jobs coming out of business school. It wasn't until my third job, which was moving into the wealth management industry, that I finally felt that it was really the right path for me. And so a few years after business school, I ended up working for JP Morgan in their private wealth management group, the private bank, as they call it, and spent a decade there. And then I spent 5 years at Bessemer Trust.
And that work strikes me as being incredibly relevant for the fundraising world. And at the same time, much more common for people to go from the advancement world to the private banking world, times in pursuit of maybe compensation potential that wouldn't be as typical here. Less common for people to come the other way, to go from that private banking world into the world of philanthropy. And so just tell me about, like, when you think about being a great private banker versus being a great fundraiser, is it 30% overlap? Is it 90% overlap? Like, how different is the work really?
Well, it comes down to people and trust, people skills, establishing trust, delivering for your clients or for your donors, for your teammates. So to me, the skills are very transferable. Now I have a wider range of responsibilities now than I did in private wealth management, which has actually been very interesting and rewarding. Just having a lot of different jobs. So I'd say, a good portion of my job, let's just call it 20% of my job, is very well aligned with what I was doing in the 15 years of my wealth management career. The other 80%, there's more executive responsibilities, and I'm in charge of our alumni association and just more management stuff than I had in the wealth management world.
And so my understanding is, while you're doing that work, you've also reconnected with the Naval Academy. You're volunteering. You're getting involved with philanthropy through some it looks like personal work that you've done. Definitely want to know more about Run to Honor. It sounds like an amazing sort of personal endeavor into the world of philanthropy. Just tell me about kind of the parallel path that looks like it brought you closer to the opportunity that you're now pursuing as.
Well, yeah, I went back to business school and went out into the business and corporate world, and we were at war. And a lot of the people I went through the Naval Academy with and served in the SEALs with were off in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, we started losing people. We lost thousands of American soldiers and Marines and sailors and airmen in that time period in the early 2000s. And it just really, it hit close to home when people I knew and loved and served with were lost. And it was around 2007 that I got involved in helped lead an effort with a few friends to memorialize our classmates who we had lost. We lost 6 people after graduation in aircraft accidents or in combat. And we just wanted to do something to remember them. So we got together. About 100 of us ran the Marine Corps Marathon, and we did a nice dinner together to honor those individuals. And when we finished, one of the family members said, "Hey, this was great. Can't wait to see you next year." And we turned to each other and said, okay, I guess we'll come back next year. So this began an effort, turned into an organization that really got me connected more with the Naval Academy, with other alumni. And to me, it was just the heart of why I went to the Naval Academy. And these people were the best of us, and they're gone. And I just felt a real obligation to honor them. And then later now to help create more of them. So it's really come full circle where none of this involved philanthropy at first. It did lead me to get involved in our alumni board. And I ran for election to be on our alumni board, and I served a few terms there. And, by the time I came upon the opportunity that I'm in now, I had not been really involved with our foundation other than just being a modest donor. I'd not been involved with the board. In fact, it was a little opaque to me. It was just, it's not as public, just the nature of the work that's going on and the way the board is run and managed. It's not as outward facing as our alumni association board is. And that's not by design. It's not because it's, secretive necessarily. It's just because it's very focused on fundraising and not broad communication to alumni and providing alumni services.
Well, I'd encourage everybody to check out runtohonor.com. You can go / who we honor. There's a link right there, and you'll see the list of classmates that Jeff was just referring to, and amazing, amazing initiative. And at the same time, man, I always think about this, and I remember even in business school, we'd have a case study discussion, and you'd have somebody talking about the bad day at work they had with the mean boss, and then you'd have somebody that had served talk about their bad day at work, and it was just like, oh man, what are we even talking about here? How do we even,
right?
The things that you think you're having a bad day or you're feeling sorry for yourself relative to normal course of business. And there had to be times, like maybe every veteran that goes through a business school discussion, or maybe just life in general, where you just like rolling your eyes at what people consider a challenge or a problem. On the other hand, right, I mean, empathy is important, and it's all relative, and people can have real issues, but man, the scale of things that you guys navigate on a daily basis, it's just amazing.
I agree with you, and that's just it remains a real motivation for me. That's what grounds me in my work. Is I think about, hey, Eric Christensen, one of my fallen classmates who my son is named after. Eric would love to be having this bad day that I'm having, and God, what would Eric be doing if he was here right now? Like I could imagine where he was headed, but who knows? But it would be something spectacular. I know that. So just those kind of people, just thinking about them and reflecting on their sacrifice and just who they were, and reading the stories of the people I didn't know. I mean, to me, that's what gets me going. I mean, again, I said this before, like that's why we're here. We're helping create these leaders.
So how do you convert that emotion, those stories? I mean, you all have more stories at an individual level, at a broader scale. When you talk about the impact stories, I mean, you guys got it. So how do you convert that into a vision for where the foundation can go? And for a lot of people, right, people might know, hey, this is a federally supported program. If you get into the Naval Academy, the federal government is paying for that education in return for the service that you've just outlined. So why do you need philanthropy?
Right. Yeah, well,
maybe the answer to that question is different in 2023 than it was 30 years ago.
Right.
And so, there's more to the story, and how do you take that where you've got this latent passion and connection and affinity that nobody else has, and how do you convert that into philanthropy, and why?
Right. Yeah, I'd say there's really, you cover two important things. One is telling stories and just connecting with folks on that visceral level. So to me, that's still a learning process, truly. the things that I mentioned that really motivate me, I feel like I've got to be a little cautious in tying that to what we're doing. Like, yes, it's at the very heart of it, creating those leaders, but I don't want to try to sort of trade on tragedy, so to speak. But it comes up in very genuine and organic ways. And people understand. Like, you don't have to say much. Like, I kind of went into it with you. I could probably boil it down to a sentence with our alumni, and they know exactly what I'm talking about because they've experienced the same losses that I have with their shipmates or their classmates. But to the question of, hey, why does a federally funded institution need our support? First of all, there are many, many universities out there that get state and federal funding. So we're not unique in that regard where there's government funding at play. But I could tell you when it comes to the Naval Academy, the government, they're trying to produce an officer with certain qualifications. And federal funding makes sure that officers are qualified in certain things, that they meet academic requirements, that they get certain summer training, that they pass their physical tests, that they're medically screened. But what the government doesn't do is the government doesn't and really can't think about how do you create the best possible environment. I mean, there are limited resources out there. So just to give you one example, there's a new lacrosse center that we're raising money for that's going to come to the Naval Academy. The government could rightly look at our facilities and say, hey, you got a locker room, you've got a field, you've got uniforms, like, you're good. We got to go improve this submarine repair facility up in Groton. We don't need to build you a new lacrosse facility. Yet we have enthusiastic, passionate donors who want the very best for our lacrosse team. They want a world-class facility that's going to bring in top players who are then going to go on to be exceptional officers in the Navy and Marine Corps. And I'm talking about the men's and the women's team. We're building a facility for both of them. And it's just not going to happen without philanthropy. Another example is we, through the foundation, organize support to send over 400 midshipmen students overseas in a given year. And some of these are summer trips. Some of these are exchange programs. There's always a strong educational component to this, and they're not going on vacation. They're being led in a meaningful, experiential, history-based journey somewhere where they're learning other cultures and learning important stories. That's funded through philanthropy. The Navy needs to make sure that our midshipmen get out to the fleet, that they get time on ships, that they get time with the Marine Corps. They're not as concerned that, we send midshipmen to Vietnam and tour the battlefields and the tunnels and talk to the people there. But you talk to midshipmen about what impacted you the most while you were at the Naval Academy. And very commonly, it's these things, these international trips is one example, funded by philanthropy that meant a lot to them, that prepared them for the next phase of their career.
And so how do you align on those kind of additive next level experiences, right? You're basically saying, look, there is a base level of experience and investment. We want to take it from that base level to the next level.
Yep.
Athletically, experientially, academically, other initiatives. How do you decide between now and, the next 3 years, 5 years, 2030 vision? We want to go from here to here around these key themes, and then really start bringing that story to your global community.
Yeah. And so we call that the margin of excellence. That's our vernacular of what we're helping deliver to the Naval Academy, a margin of excellence beyond what the government is supporting. And the way we get there is we work with the Naval Academy. So we're different than most, maybe all, except other service academies, higher ed organizations where we are outside of the Naval Academy. We are nonprofit, independent of the Naval Academy. I don't report to the president or it's the superintendent In our case, I report to, an independent board of a 501c3. So we work very collaboratively where the Naval Academy on a decade, it's a decade long process where they go through a strategic planning process and say, here's where we want to go over the next 10 years. Here are our priorities. Here are the things we want to get better at. Here are the things that we value, the things that we need. And they put this plan together. Within that plan, some of the things that they aspire to do or be, they can do on their own. They have the right resources. It's just a matter of priorities and management. But other things require philanthropic support. And then they come to us and they said, okay, here's our list of where we would like your support. And then we vet it. We figure out if it's appropriate for us. If they said, replace the roof of Bancroft Hall, which is the dormitory, we're going to say no. The government should be doing that. But they don't ask that because they understand. They understand that we're working, as I mentioned, the margin of excellence. We're bringing the extras. So we vet what they ask for, and we begin organizing around it. We figure out, okay, what recognition opportunities are available within this list? What can we name, and what are we building, and how might the recognition go with that? And we work on those sort of big pieces together, and we turn that into a campaign. Now, everyone's always in a campaign, right? So it's an organizing framework, but we're always raising money. And like right now, we're technically in a campaign where we're counting for the campaign that won't actually be announced and launched until next year. But they're just ongoing needs that our donors are funding that are working against that wish list of the Naval Academy.
I'd love to, as we conclude, I know we're kind of at time here, just talk a little bit about how you are engaging or thinking about engaging your community. And we're obviously doing some work together in that regard, but one of the reasons that I'm so excited about just scaling more kind of virtual engagement is you have one of the most distributed alumni populations in the world. First of all, you have people coming from all 50 states. You're then sending them back all over the country and world. And then whether they stay in the service or transition as you did, they're all over the place. And so it's not like, some of your peers have their top 3 markets, and you can really spend time, in New York and DC and Philadelphia, right? Like you have unbelievable distribution, which means it's not quite as easy to say, hey, look, let's go do our, campaign events in our top 5 cities, because that's only going to reach a fraction of your population. So how do you think about like engaging people globally? And frankly, in a post-pandemic environment, I would imagine, it's easy to do this now in a way that whether somebody's, on a ship or in a submarine, you might be able to connect with them in ways that when you were serving would have seemed impossible. And so just tell me a little bit about the intersection of your global community, technology, and how you reach people.
Yeah. Well, one of the true pleasures for me is that I've had so many alumni say to me, how can I help? I get that question all the time. And I wish I always had something right then and there where I said, hey, here's what you can do. And there are a few things anybody can do to help. But we've got a deep desire amongst a large part of our community to be helpful. And so the way we're tackling it is, we do have some geographic concentrations by number, just by raw number of alumni who live in a given area, and also by alumni who have been generous with us or involved with us philanthropically. So they overlap in some cases, and others, we've got areas with maybe the 10th biggest city or metro market that's the 5th, biggest donor set. But we are putting volunteer structures around these different geographies where we're building regional committees that will help organize support, and then we're making an effort to be present in all those different places. So we do have to get out there and get around.
Yeah. No, it's and so as you think about the kind of air game versus the ground game, thoughts on, as you move into formal campaign, just how you think about virtual, in-person, one-to-one field visits versus scaling events. And obviously you've got a lot of teammates helping you think through, those strategies, but
Yeah.
you really got to get right.
Yeah. Well, during COVID, this preceded my time here, but of course, everything went virtual. And so everyone got very comfortable having meetings and putting together different forums in a virtual environment. I think we've swung back hard the other way, that because we can get to people and because we can be in person, we're really focused on that. I think we'll probably come back the other way a little bit and layer in more virtual engagement, especially as we really hone in on the key messages and key priorities that we're going public with in the coming years. And we just, another benefit or just real jewel for us is we have these great alumni who are willing to speak. We've got retired flag officers, and we've got, ambassadors and CEOs and people that are just happy to come in and talk. Like what this, can't see his picture because it's really small, but gentleman that was 2 years ahead of me at the Naval Academy, was a SEAL, became an astronaut. He's now running the Medal of Honor Museum down in Texas, doing development, by the way. They're raising a lot of money very effectively down there, but his name's Chris Cassidy. And you got people like that folks are just really interested in hearing from. And so if I picked up the phone right now and said, "Hey, Chris, would you do this virtual session with me? I want to interview you about this or that." He'd do it in an instant. And so would hundreds of other alumni. So I think we've gravitated towards doing as much as we can in person, but as we get more into this official campaign mode, we'll definitely be doing virtual as well.
Love it. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspectives with our audience. I've got to let you at least make a plug for your team. Are you hiring? If people want to stay in touch with you, I know you're active on LinkedIn. Is that the best way?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn for sure. Not as active as I should be, but I'm working on it. But we are hiring. We have we call them regional directors of development. Our major gift officers, and we're looking for one here in Annapolis, Maryland. You do need to live here in our model. We've got some other staff we're hiring as well. Someone that would be essentially a more junior position to that, supporting that position as well. So yeah, through LinkedIn, Mike Hoffman is a VP of development, who I know. Bill O'Connor is our executive vice president of development. So between the three of us, we're out there on LinkedIn and very findable, reachable if anyone is interested in what we're doing here, either looking for an opportunity or just wants to talk. We've been very lucky to have some other great schools help us, and if we can return the favor to anybody, we're happy to.
Well, I love that. I know you all have a beautiful new facility, and I did hear from some of my teammates that they've been working with Mike Hoffman to put together maybe a regional leadership meetup in March. And so, hopefully some of the people listening will have the opportunity to experience some of what you shared here today in person. So thank you for that, Jeff, and for taking the time. And I'd encourage everybody listening, reach out to Jeff, say you heard his story on the podcast, and make sure you follow what's going on at the Naval Academy Foundation. And so with that, I'll wrap today's episode. Thanks again, Jeff Webb, President and CEO of the US Naval Academy Alumni Association and Foundation. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Brent.